Well, what is the Chaz, they say? Well, I am pretty sure. But definitions are created based on perspectives of understanding. So why not me? I guess to start, I was like the majority in the racing world. Growed up always wanting to do what I watched out there on the racetrack. At that time, I wanted to be Jeff Day or maybe Wayne Brooks, heck, even a guy like Charlie Brown. My favorite stock car driver at the time was Jeff Gordon. Him being a dirt guy, and he always just seemed to outdrive people on the ragged edge. He didn't have to run people over to win like old Dale Sr. did. At a young age, you really don't know what it costs to race, so I would just go. Even when my dad didn't have the money to go, I would mow yards just to get up the money to pay for gas and tickets. How was childhood? Well, I was the oldest of three. I had two younger sisters. And well, it was kinda rough, I assume. The typical redneck childhood. The belt was used. And I got the whoopings probably more than usual, I assume. I never got hit with the fist or anything, but I got the belt a lot. I didn't think my dad was too happy with the fact of him being this muscled up guy with, and I was overweight as a child. I think that played a factor in some moments. I remember being forced to run laps at one point because he didn't want a fat-ass kid, in his words. Most of the whoopings I got I don't really care to remember, as they seem to happen so often, but the ones that I do remember are the noble ones, I would call them. There would be times that something was done wrong in the house and no one claimed the incident between me and my two younger sisters. And what would happen is we would get lined up, and he would come by and ask if we did it. If we said no, we got hit with the belt. I knew I had done nothing wrong, but I was tougher than my sisters. I had gotten the beatings more than them. When I got the hit, it wasn't that bad, but when they did, they couldn't take it as well. So every time this occurred, even though I did nothing wrong, after seeing my sisters in pain, I knew the one thing I could do to save them is to say that I did it, and then take the actual full beating myself. I was making this decision at the age of 10 years old to take the hits for others, to save them. I did not know if this mentality was a good thing to create, but I guess that is why today I'm able to say or do the things that I do, because I've always been okay with taking the beatings for others. I will always try to sacrifice myself and save someone, whether they deserve it, whether my sacrifice is deserved or not. Now, the weird part about my dad was, even though he was a little hard on the belt, he was a righteous person. Most of the whoopings I got, most of the time at least, it was when I did something wrong. What is right or wrong? It's a matter of perspective, but that's not a matter of discussion. So were the whoopings harder than it needed to be? More times than not, yes. Was the whooping a little longer or harder than one of my sisters would get? Yeah, but my dad was righteous and moralistic in his ways. If something or someone was done wrong, he would be the first one to say or do something about it, help people in need, or sacrifice himself for others at times. But not always. There were things he did wrong. I think this is once again a part of the normal redneck childhood, as it seems a lot of us got the belt a lot by the daddy. But Daddy was also a person we loved because he treated others how he treated us. Some kind of weird moralistic foundation. Me, myself, I saw a lot that my dad did right and a lot that he did wrong. And I'll always do my best to not repeat any of his wrongs doing. There should be there should be a line drawn in the sand between what is right and what is family tradition. I do think a lot of people should stop doing what they do just because their dad did it. It takes a bit of common sense to make that happen, but oh well. Anyway, when I got to 17 though, my dad died from melanoma, skin cancer. Doctors said it was because he had worked so long out in the Texas heat. That period was like a blur in a way. My dad was this stocky, kick-ass kind of guy, and to watch him whittle down to the point he couldn't lift his own bed sheets in the nursing home was a lot. All I remember is telling him on the day of his death that I wasn't gonna be no loser. I was gonna be a winner. I kinda didn't go to the track much after that. Sort of didn't have anyone to go with. And going on my own was just a reminder of the hero that I had lost, known as Dad. I kind of didn't care much about anything at that point. Went from a B-average student in high school to dropping out. Started smoking cigarettes, going to the parties that most enjoy at 18 years of age. Didn't really care to brush my teeth. Went from no cavities at the yearly dentist appointment to butterscotch yellow, which is why my teeth are so bad today. This era of not really caring developed the hardcore issues dentistry-wise that I have now, which is also a reason I don't care to get them fixed. They are somewhat of a symbolistic representation of my own road. A tattoo, call it, without the desecration of toxins in your skin. Anyway, after the party scene got a little old and I still somewhat missed racing, but I had become of age to where I wanted to race. Watching had already died for me in a way, and that's when I found this thing called sim racing.
Thompson coming all the way from the 19th position.
Yeah, like Brian said, this is basically a sim racing legend versus a real racing legend. Christopher Bell and Chaz Thompson battling it out as Chaz edges out Christopher Bell.
Sim racing was one of those things to me that I think was like to a lot of the sim racers. I couldn't afford a bottom dollar $10,000 investment into a race car at 19 years old, but I could afford a little $50 Microsoft Sidewinder and a barely able to run computer. That's about all I had. But my first race I finished third, and the next race I won. And then I went on to win too much. Was sponsored by a few big companies, conversated with a few big names, and I sim raced for some years. And at the same time started working as an auto tech. Paid cash for a truck and a car, had an apartment, all at the age of 23. Things were looking good. Only thing that had went wrong was the car I had bought threw a rod out and blew its engine, but the truck was still running smooth. Well, the party scene was still in full swing throughout this time, and well, it caught up with me one December night. I am still somewhat upset about how this all went down. I basically went to a party where there were rooms to stay in after the party had been had. Well, with that in mind, I kicked the drinking into overdrive, but at around midnight, everyone wanted to go out clubbing, and well, I had planned to go to work the next day, and they said you can't stay here while we are all gonna go out, basically. So I attempted to drive home, which was less than 3 miles away. I honestly had no right in my mind to drive, but all I could think about was not being at work the next day. Of that drive, all I remember is passing the nursing home where my dad had died. Next thing I know, I'm in someone's front yard with the whole right side of my truck missing and a couple squad cars surrounding the scene. I'd passed out behind the wheel, sideswiped a parked vehicle, and came to a stop inches from running into a house. Luckily, the only person who got hurt or inflicted in that instance was me. But I lost more than just a truck in that process. With going to jail for a few days and no vehicle, I lost the job I had, lost the apartment, and only had one place to stay after getting out. Basically a guy's garage. No insulation, a small space heater, and really if it felt 100 degrees outside, it was 110 in there. And if it was 20 degrees outside, it was 25 in there. Not the ideal spot a human should be, but it was all that I had besides the streets. Along with this situation, my mom was diagnosed with ovarian cancer and was given just a few years to live. I kind of never lacked optimism. Even though I was in a bad situation, I have always been able to take the hits and get back up. I ended up landing a job at a local boat club where I ended up becoming somewhat of a co-manager of the docks. And then around that time, my sister had alluded to me that there was an opening to be an announcer at the local racetrack named Devil's Bow. I had done some announcing on the sim racing side of things, so I knew I could announce. I took the opportunity there in 2012, and after a year I had displayed to the track some artistic ability and some commercial production ability, and started doing more on the promotional side of things in 2013. I developed title sponsorships for divisions. After getting everyone on board with that idea, we all collaborated to get a points fund together for racers in 2014, which was at $25,000 between the 4 classes, with the sprint car champion taking home $4,000. A pretty big prize for weekly racing, especially in this area. I got into designing some race cars on the side. Heck, one of them made it onto the Sprint Car Midget magazine. They even had my logo on one of the Clausen cars at the Chili Bow. Into 2015, I helped develop the Elite Non-Wing Sprint Car series with a guy named Nathan Moore by pretty much naming the thing and helping create the initial logo. I was doing a better than average job, I felt, on promoting the drivers and track. Got featured in a documentary segment, got some newspapers to write some columns, organized some car shows, made driver profile videos, did weekly driver talk shows, live on the microphone, but no matter what, it seemed like the world didn't care. I started to speak a little more about racers' respect in 2015, as I kept noticing more and more, no matter how much I reached out to local news stations, that they just didn't care and seemed ignorant to the sport and what was actually going on out here. How much talent and work was involved. For example, when the Outlaws came back to the Devil's Bow, I put out my weekly info to the stations, and well, I got a call for once. The lady was like, "Wow, the Outlaws in Mesquite." And I was baffled on how she sounded excited to cover some things going on out the track for once. Until come to find out, she figured out I wasn't talking about the new arena football team in town, named the Mesquite Outlaws. And over this entire time of me doing just about everything and anything that a person in dirt track promotion could do, it didn't matter how great these guys were, how their talent was just as good or higher than an asphalt chump on Sunday, or how nobody in the world could come in, race this class against this driver on this track and beat them. All that mattered or they knew about was their stock car icons on television. And I got to experience the greatest example of that truth. Because the only time a news station called me on a Sunday morning wanting to know about a track or a driver was when Kevin Ward Jr. got killed. And that is when we all should have realized that nobody will ever care about your local driver putting on the show, throwing sliders on an inch's notice, kicking ass and taking names. They aren't going to care about our guys until he goes in there, misses that slider that one time, flips off in the field, and burns to death and dies. And if there's anything to take away from the Ward Jr. incident, it should be that. Because just like we shouldn't ban guns because a few psychopaths, we shouldn't ban getting out of the car and yelling at a guy as they comes by because of the same. Heck, getting out of the car and throwing a fit was a part of the racing entertainment world for years and no one ever got killed. Taking that away took away an element of our show. We should have been pissed that no one cares about the Kevin Ward Jr.'s that are racing every week across this country until they are burned or dead and gone. But once again, that wasn't our concern. We ourselves acted like the world around us, which is why maybe we get treated the way we do. Because we didn't care about what happened to the weekly racer. We only cared about what would happen to the stock car icon. Anyway, 2015 went well. Things are okay. I had been taunted by a few racers that if I could lose enough weight that they would let me hot lap their car. And well, my mom had finally lost her battle with ovarian cancer and died that summer. Losing my dad had toughened me up a bit to losing a parent, and I was already out of the nest and living on my own at the time. The one thing she left for me in her name was her car. The same car you see me in today. One of the only few things I've ever been given in life. Well, a combination of those two things kind of spurred my weight loss journey. Initially going to the gym every day, which leads to eating right. When you go and bust ass a few hours, you are not willing to throw that effort away in lust for a burger and a fry. So when you start to eat healthy, you start to learn what is what. And honestly, without this weight loss journey, I would not think the way I do today. I had been told too much weight to lose, low thyroid, slow metabolism, but I felt I could change that. I can do all this other stuff, why not this? So in studying the food industry, you begin to learn the game of manipulation. You read and figure out what foods are actual food, where they come from, how are they made, who owns them, and why you should or shouldn't eat them. And at the end of that research, you find the world we live within is all about the dollar more than you. You learn that this world gives zero fucks about the people living in it, and that most normalities of a diet are a bullshit ploy to turn you into the cow, the cash cow. How the food companies and big pharma companies are together. The bad food that you are raised to believe in as the normal diet and the right way of doing things is nothing but a way to get you littered with illnesses that put you on a pill or in a hospital bed or some kind of treatment in the medical industry, which makes you dependent on insurance, which makes the industry thrive, which is only allowed to be legal because of their funding of politicians, thus controlling all the laws and regulations. The big daddy on top doesn't care about Mother Earth or you. But because the system is owned, and the system controls the TV shows, the advertisements, and funds their own counterintuitive research, you aren't raised to understand the business. You are raised to believe in the system. At the end of the day, a human strength is its mind. You cage a lion because of its strength, and you manipulate a human because of the same thing. And that is the one thing most should take away from my weight loss. It isn't an example of determination or grit, but an example of what you can do with yourself when you get out of their box and learn how you are getting milked. Put their system down and pick up your own controller and start playing your own game of life. Let me calm down for a second. After the beginning of my weight loss, things were going relatively fine. I had lost 60 pounds in 6 months. To start the year in 2016, though, I had what you would call a damn bump in the road. The week of our spring nationals, I went out Thursday for St. Patrick's Day, the day of the green. I thought it would be festive to partake in smoking some green, or devil's lettuce as you people call it. It didn't work out that great. I got caught in the parking lot with some friends in my car who had brought the weed with us to the arena. It was their weed in my car. I told them I would take the blame, and that's what I did. I would rather take the blame than have them get in any trouble. And they took me to jail for it. I was in jail until the next day, which was opening day of our season. And 3 things luckily occurred there. Somehow my sister had found out I was in jail and got me out. The race had gotten rained out, and eventually the judge of the case would dismiss it with a $150 fine. This was after I'd already agreed to a plea deal of 2 years probation and a $500 fine. This was the last time I would ever smoke the devil's lettuce again. It wasn't worth the trouble, and I had only done it occasionally, like on St. Patrick's Day or some social gathering once or twice a year. I told the track that I had gotten in trouble for public intoxication. They were more concerned with me, though. Few people thought that I had died, because I'd always been responsive and on the ball if anything was needed to be done. And this was the first time I didn't immediately call back or respond. After that, the ownership of Devil's Bow had acquired a Friday night track named RPM Speedway, and things were doubled up on the workload. I was able to keep things going with both tracks promotional-wise, and it was fun to get in some short track racing. The season started with a lot of rainouts, and things weren't working well financially for the track. I was getting the blame, it seemed, for the failure to not produce huge crowds when we did race, and after multiple conversations, I had decided that I'd had enough of getting told off. So I relinquished my full-time role of being the promo guy and took a job at a local roofing company of a racer who had saw what I was doing at the track and wanted to have a guy like me for his business. At that point, I was going to continue maintaining the website duties for the tracks, but I was not going to be in the role of general promotions anymore. The next week after I made that decision, for the first time ever at the racetrack, the owner did not show. And come to find out, during the week he had become severely ill and was bedridden. I continued working at the local roofing company, making a good living. I didn't love roofing like I did racing, and in racing I was making enough to get by, but in the roofing gig I was making more in a month than 3 months at the track. I also continued working out, with the hopes of my lifelong dream of driving a car around a track coming true. Heck, I wanted to drive so bad that I even made laps in my own car at times. As dangerous as that was, halfway through the year I'd lost 100 pounds, at almost the exact time my mom had died the year before. Then it happened. I got the opportunity to get 10 laps in a top-notch sport modified. Most were happy and surprised at the ability I had displayed, but some others were, let's just say, jealous. Some of these guys had been driving for 10 to 20 years, and all over the track at times, and here comes this announcer guy from the booth, hops in the car, and after 5 laps looks smoother and faster than them. Heck, one guy, before I got in the car, said he would give me $200 if I was within a second of his time. But I went 2/10 faster than him. And to this day, I still haven't seen that $200. Regardless, I didn't care. This date would go down in my life's history. Something I will never forget. But at the same time, this same day, who knew that this date would go down in the racing world's history, and a date that no one in the racing world would ever forget as well. Brian Clausen, a guy who I would consider one of the greatest racers in our modern time. Wing on or wing off, a true dirt racing superstar who went and tried the asphalt, but who cares what he did there? Driving dirt is its own skill set, like MMA, more technical. Asphalt is like boxing, just one discipline and somewhat controlled by the quality of race car than racer. I was very upset because ESPN gave him 45 seconds of a mention. Eventually, they would go on to do a special. But I guess being an amazing dirt track racer at that time didn't matter more than being an organ donor down the road. viable is a word you should learn. Anyhow, people flocked to the track after he had died to say grace. But I remember the fiancée saying in a video I saw, she wished that all those people were there when he was racing. And you know what? That is a damn good question. And this instance made me want to find a damn answer. Fact is, there is a lot of Brian Clausens out there right now racing that no one will care about until they miss that slider by an inch, or get burned, or walk out onto a track and say, fuck you. They don't matter until they are dead. And this shit is going to change. So for me, after this all occurred, the track owner also never made it back to the racetrack and died the next month. I continued working at the roofing company, making good money. My credit was above average, so I went and got tied into a new car. Throughout that time, not only did the Clausen thing occur, but also I had seen one of our local champions' son worshiping a stock car icon. He didn't look up to his dad. He looked up to the pop culture icon. You see this in a lot of cultures. With the Kim Kardashians, the rappers, the football players, they all get idolized more than the parents and local difference makers. Or in this case, champions. And I said to him, why does your son look up to him more than you? You could take Joey Logano's ass in a modified. He would have no chance. You're just as talented as him. And he looked at me with a tear in his eye and said, I don't know why. I guess it's because he's on TV and I'm not. And I said, yeah, you won't be there unless you die. That is the only time the rest of the world will know about you. Going into that winter, I hosted the track's banquet. And in that banquet, I stood up there to close out by saying that going into next year, I don't know how. But if I can change and lose 200 pounds, that I could change this respect issue with these racers. And that the world would know about you guys out here on these dirt tracks if it's the last damn thing I do. After that, the people at the track had started talking to me about next season. Now things had lost its luster with me not being there doing my weekly duties and promotional tactics. Into 2017, I was still at the roofing company, making the money. And at that time, I had lost 200 pounds and was looking at life completely different. In the process of losing weight, not only does the body transform, but the mind does too. I originally started to race a car in the fear of long-term health issues or death. But after, I looked at life as more monumental. The days and nights you live are not for sure. They are your life, and you have to make them with love, not money. Chili Bowl week was coming, and with all this on my mind, I made the decision to quit the roofing company and go back to the track. Starting with no true job offer, just a discussion of willing to work things out. I drove that day from the company office to Tulsa, not knowing what to expect, what money I would make, or what was going to happen. All I knew is in that moment, that day, I had drove away from the money and headed towards love. I think racing is somewhat of a love that is not impossible to find in the world, but it's pretty rare. With how I treat love, it is one of the only things that is willing to offer the same. See, no matter what happens, it don't matter if you have a 6-pack or 6 cars, front seat of a car or a mansion, bad teeth or brighty whities, hair's fully fresh or receding, racing is there for you. It is dependable, loyal, devoted, and real. Anyways, I got to the track, got the hotel for the week, and watched an amazing week of racing. That week I also ran into an old sim racing bud and rival named Kyle Larson. who at the old bar room said he had watched me rip that modified around the track and was really surprised at the weight loss and wanted to know how I did it. I just simply said, I followed the money and did my research. After coming back from the Chili Bowl, I'd made a deal to return to full time at the tracks. I was going to basically make enough money to live and somehow hope to design a few websites or car designs to pay my car note. I would also get a higher percentage of cut of sponsorships I could bring in. It was one of those things where I had to make the dirt racing thing work. There was no bad week that I was going to have if I was going to make it. This was all in. I then drove over 1,000 miles in 4 days, all over the DFW area, going from business to business with a sponsorship brochure that I had made. And that is where things became even more apparent. I walked into office after office and no one had even heard of a damn race car, especially on dirt, some dirt track. And even though I was attempting to explain things, they didn't care. One marketing manager at a car dealership had a stock car jacket on, and he said he had heard of dirt, but they weren't interested in sponsoring lower form racing. I went on to explain how even the Tony Stewart he referenced had came from dirt, that he even gets beat, and we have guys racing at the track who are better than him. They just don't have the millions to run stock cars. He looked kinda shocked, but said that stuff is just too unknown and is looked at as high school, and they already sponsor a high school football team. I wasn't upset really, but I began to understand more and more the reason this sport is in the dumps is just like the food industry. It is misunderstood and the business side isn't viewed correctly. Why would any business get involved with a track or car that literally no one in the regular world has even heard of? And if they have, it is some lower form redneck YMCA recreational football crap, which is just completely wrong. I remember the next day going to downtown Dallas, walking up into WFAA, which is the local ABC News network, to basically light their ass up and give them a few tidbits as to what this dirt racing thing is, and how amazing these local racers are and how things work. They told me to calm down, and that I needed an appointment to speak with anyone. I went home and made a video. Funny, I guess, talking about how these stock car guys are worried about which restaurant to fly to on a Monday, while the dirt guys are wondering which bill not to pay so they can make it to the race next week. How Schatz and Bloomquist are just as talented as the stock car guys in dirt racing, but the world don't care about them. That video got 17,000 views. I also made a little music video for the first time. That also got 6,000 views. It was a cover of a song by Eminem named No Love. I went to an outlaw race in Kilgore the next week where I got into an argument with their announcer about how we need to stand up for our dirt guys. He said we need to work with NASCAR. A bunch of people later ran into me that night and liked my video, but some were referencing the music video and not the comical racing video. But anyway, a few days went by and I made another video talking about how the dirt world needs to care about the dirt guys. I said to make new Swindells, we have to treat them like Swindells. And I remember saying, stop cheering on Cole, please. In that video, I was somewhat pissed off, and well, the next day, the track told me I needed to not make any more videos like that anymore. That some people from TMS, Texas Motor Speedway, had seen it and called them, and that they are taking offense to the things I am saying. I went to dinner later that night with some of my racer buddies and told them of this account. One guy said, it's funny how they are intimidated by the things I'm saying. And the other guy said, you know what was the realest thing you said in that video? Was when you said stop cheering on Cole. And I said to myself, well, maybe if I take this weight loss process into account, I can apply that to this thing called racing. I lost the weight through understanding, looking at the paper trail, figuring out the business side that leads to the widespread problem, the root of the issue. So I then went home and took an entire night to research the sport of racing to find out what the hell is going on. Going into the research, I started with media. That is what the system uses to get people to buy burgers and fries. They use Top Gun to get people to want to be a fighter pilot. They use Fast and the Furious to sell aftermarket parts. So let's see how they got people to buy into this current racing situation. So a very long story short, the shift of dirt racing icons from sprint car racers to NASCAR drivers from sprint cars, a mix of the kart versus F1 battle for the global stage, where kart was becoming bigger than F1, which ended up with Indianapolis being jealous, as they always were, splitting that scene up with IRL and helping NASCAR rise to the top, as the Brickyard 400 helped fund the IRL creation. Along with Tony Stewart taking the path of Indy cars to NASCAR, created a illusion of NASCAR is the pros and everything else is a stepping stone to them. Thus, every other form of racing and their top drivers being looked down upon instead of up to was the gist of it all. But this was basically the hardcore 90s pop culture surge that occurred in music and movies, that occurred in racing as well, an icon shift based in power and control with a special set of match tires to boot. The business with the car companies selling cars with an Impala instead of an Indy car was smart. The quarter midget scene would take flight, and a whole list of businesses profiting all over the place because of this shift in American motorsports. And after reading all this, seeing the movie, the madness, the crazy shift, and kind of diagnosing what I felt impacted the world of racing so much, I was ready to lay the cards out on the table and let people make the judgments as they see fit. I was ready to open my mouth a little loud. Well, when I was recording a video, I developed a pain in my lower back through my sides. The pain became unbearable. I did the worst thing possible looking back on it, but maybe not. I went to WebM to look up what the symptoms and areas of pain could be. Well, the web said it was massive kidney failure, and pretty much death. The pain was worse than anything I'd ever felt, and I couldn't even stand, really, because of it. I ended up getting in my car and headed to the hospital, and in that ride, a part of my mind felt like this could be it. My dad had went to the hospital for pain, and he got the end date. My mom did the same, and I guess this was my trip. I remember that being the thought of no tomorrow, looking back on what I had or had not done and just thinking this was it. So I got into the hospital and they rushed me into the testing area, took blood, did MRI, all the scans, etc. They gave me morphine for the pain, which I'd never had before, and then came over to tell me that all this pain wasn't my kidneys, it was because I had lost my weight and had some slight constipation, and all the weight of the excess skin and constipation in my gut area was ripping the muscles on my sides from my back. I was thrilled. They gave me some experimental pain pills, and I went home. For the next 24 to 48 hours, things got weird, or exciting as some would say. The only things I've watched or listened to that is even close as far as experience is when someone like Joe Rogan explains a DMT experience. But basically it was like I was in a movie playing a part, but in an observational position. I remember everything that happened, but I didn't feel in control. I remember what I had seen or felt, but I didn't have fear. I had a charge. Just weird. But I was in the mode of recording everything, and I recorded what I'd saw and experienced, which was everything from being Jesus to seeing the devil. It was just all types of things that were experienced that day. Anyway, after the video was put out of what I had saw or experienced, it was very damaging to my image. And being associated with the track, that would damage their image. I was let go by the track that day, and the racing segment of me at the tracks were over. And in a way, I was over. I was exiled by just about everyone I knew because of the video I had made. No one really knew what was going on. No one really wanted to know. No one wanted to listen to me. I was deemed somewhat of a freak at that point. There were really only a few people that continued to associate with me, and if anything ever becomes of me, it will become of them as well. I was still confused as fuck the following days. What was real or what wasn't? I saw some scared shitless things. The next day, I threw away the pills the hospital had prescribed me and dealt with the pain, thinking maybe that is what caused the situation to happen. I would go on to find out later down the road that I had a severe side effect to the morphine that caused a hallucinogenic experience. Anyway, after that, I had some time on my hands, and well, after seeing how the food industry worked and getting an idea of how the racing industry worked, I decided to do some research on how the real world worked. I went and dug into the actual real world occurrences that were happening, and basically it is all abroad. Pretty much everything in the racing world or food industry is a microcosm on how the real world works. I just started seeing the widespread bullshit of the show being put on, the manipulation of the herd that is a human for control. That's similar to the racing world and stock car drivers were present in music, movies, politics. The good mother or father was not who people looked forward to being. It was the materialistic on-screen icons that were teaching people how to be. All for the benefit of business through consumer markets. The prejudiced racism or religious judgments, mainly based on what was culturally or regionally taught. A lack of individualism or empathy. Everyone just seemed to follow what the herd did, and the herd was led by media or cultural indoctrination. And it's been like this forever, pretty much. It honestly just pissed me off. And in a moment to where I was losing my entire life that I had built up over the last several years, all I wanted to do was speak about it or expose it, so I began to talk a lot on camera. I went head on into a wall at about 70. Came out the car with probably a broken or fractured ankle, but I hobbled home. I didn't have the money to go to a hospital, and quite honestly, I hated money. It was somewhat the root to every problem in the world, whether that be in the greed of it or the need of it. I had lost pretty much everything. I didn't have the track work anymore, and anyone with a business that I could work at that knew me from the track. And because of the video, no one wanted anything to do with me. I sent out some emails and made a few phone calls to companies trying to get some media work, but that didn't work. The next day after my wreck, it was Mother's Day. And ironically, the only car I had left after that wreck was the one my mom gave me when she died. I really didn't have anything going for me at this point, but getting knocked down to nothing was not some new concept. I've gotten up every time before, and even though this knockdown was severely emotionally devastating, I'm the type to go big or go home, and at this point, home wasn't in existence. The one thing I did have going for me outside of racing was this music gig. Well, the video I put out of me singing got some good attention. I ended up putting everything I had left from the apartment, furniture and all, into a storage unit. Took a guitar and car, and I had a bit of money, but not a lot. And to add, I still hated what I think it has done to humanity. On the way to LA, if anyone asked me for money, I gave it to them. In fact, I had given out so much money to people that I ran out of it just as I got to eastern Arizona. This is the point I basically figured out that no matter how much I give, that I needed this junk item that was created to replace the whip on humans called money. So to complete my journey to LA, I ended up helping anyone stranded on the side of the road. At first it was a guy with a flat tire that didn't have a big enough jack for his truck. He gave me some gas money for helping. Then another guy who had blown a radiator hose. I had some heavy duty tape that wrapped it up enough to hold. He gave me some gas money. Then another guy who was stranded with an empty tank. I gave him a ride to a gas station and he filled my tank in return. And that ended up giving me enough gas to get to LA. I rode into Venice Beach with no money, a half a tank of gas, a guitar, and the music venture would begin. The next day I would go to Venice Beach and play publicly for the first time. They called it busking, which is where you go and play songs and viewers or listeners would pitch money in the guitar case, I made a bit of money that day and was told by another player that there was pretty good money to be made on Hollywood Boulevard. So I packed up, drove to the end of the strip, parked across from a church, and that's where I would end up sleeping every night while in LA. Every day I would go play on the boulevard or take the metro train to different areas of LA. I made enough to eat and take showers, do laundry, and eventually gained a bit of a fan base under the stage name of Arden Black, which is a word play off of my middle name, Arden. I would go on to play a few onstage performances in the area and travel a bit on the metro. In fact, my best money making day was when I went to Manhattan Beach and made around $180 for a few hours. But the next morning I was robbed at knife point. I was back to no money and no phone, as he took that and my wallet. I wasn't scared. I felt bad for him. He was doing it for the money. That day the busking wasn't working out and I tried to sell bottled water, as I had seen other people making good money doing it. I had made like $6 singing after getting robbed, and $5 could buy a case of water, so I tried to do that. After 10 or 15 minutes, I was like, what the fuck am I doing here? These people selling water are doing it because they are not talented. I am talented. So I need to use that talent to make the money I need. So I took the water I had and gave it to the actual homeless people. The ones who didn't choose to come out here and be homeless like I did. I then went and grabbed my guitar and started to play. Before I finished the first song, a lady came by and watched a minute, then said thanks for the show and put $125 in my hat. In that moment, I learned that karma is real. Nothing instant like that happens out of coincidence. I took some money and bought a cheap phone so I could update the few people who were keeping up with me online, and the new fans I had from playing in the area. I kept playing for a few weeks and then I got robbed again. And by that time I had heard that there was better money to be made busking in Vegas. And that weekend was the Conor McGregor-Floyd Mayweather fight. So I played the next day and earned enough money to drive to Vegas. I was in LA for about a month and a half. Arriving on the day of the fight, I watched from across the street of the arena. Next day I went to play on the Strip of Vegas. I was making good money there, well enough to eat, but it was a lot hotter than LA. It was definitely hard to sleep in the car when it was 90 degrees at night and not 65. Around the same time, the hurricanes in Houston had happened, and the flag man from the racetrack I worked at was planning to take his smoker down there and help out the victims. I just had to get back to Dallas if I wanted to go with him. By day 3 in Vegas, I had sang so long each day in the heat that I had lost my voice when I woke up the next day. The only way I was making money was gone. To add to that, thinking I would be fine to sing, the night before I had spent all I had but $5 on food and water. So even though my voice was gone, I tried to sing, and I was able to a little to start the day, but it just got worse and the traffic was slow and I wasn't loud enough that I didn't get anything in the hat. So after not eating all day, which happened a few times throughout this whole music venture, I figured out my only chance to turning this $5 into anything was in a casino. So I walked across the street to the first casino there on the strip that I was near, and walked around to find a cheap slot machine that I could maybe win some money on. I sat down, and on the third pull I won $180, and I was like, damn. I then took $160, which is what I needed in gas to get back to Dallas, and put it in the car. I took $20 and said to myself, heck, now I can experience Vegas for once. I went down the strip, looked at everything, the water shows and all that, went into a casino and said, heck with it, let's roll on this other slot machine. And I pulled and had $40 left from the 20 that I had started with. Then pulled one more time and hit the grand prize. Since I was only betting the minimum of 30 cents, it came out to $1,400 or so. From $5 to $1,500 plus in less than an hour was pretty overwhelming. I then decided to walk to a few places, went to the top of the Stratocaster, went and played some blackjack, which is usually what I end up playing, and ended up making another $450 or so from there. So in one night I went from $5 to just under $2,000, all because I didn't sing, or couldn't would be the best word. And at that point, I got in my car and headed back to Dallas. Upon arriving in Dallas, I got hooked up with the team going down to Houston to help, and did. When we returned, I got a job at the old roofing company I was once at, and continued to sing, yet this time as a paid performer in downtown Dallas. I began to question the music route though at this point, looking at it as a futuristic option. I didn't truly see anything worth living for. I didn't really love music. And yeah, a couple 100,000 people at an arena sounds cool, and the fame that it brings with that, the ass and party scene sounds cool, but I didn't ever love ass and partying. And to be honest, singing the same old song every day didn't sound like a great life either. I love dirt track racing, and I wanted to save it. Because in my mind, and a lot of people would tell me all the time, it was just beating a dead horse, it was dying. I didn't really know what to do as far as racing at this point. I just knew music wasn't my love. It was a temporary fix, and a nerve breaker for sure. I wasn't scared of being exposed anymore, or public displayment, or being robbed, or being alone, or anything. My music experience taught me how to exist in exile. So I played one more show at the House of Blues in Dallas, and that was my last time to sing publicly. I went and put the guitar away and picked up my phone and thought, you know, I just need to represent myself and say what the fuck I think.
Well, hello, Mr. ESPN, Mr. Stock Car Land people. First of all, let me say all the opinions expressed in this video are solely of mine. None of the vehicles or logos or emblems that you may see represent the opinion of this video. So let's continue. So, you got these people called the greatest racers in America on those asphalt tracks on Sunday, and all their little races that they have, the little preppy rich kid country club races that they have. When you got all these men out here racing on these dirt tracks and on these short asphalt tracks that are just as good, and in my opinion getting disrespected and slapped in the face, especially when the only time they make it onto your television screen is when they get killed or burned or hurt or something happens at the dirt tracks or the short asphalt tracks, when they're just as good as the driver. They're just not a Mr. Gordon Part 2, which is what you seem to keep on trying to find over there on Stock Car Island. You know, everybody's trying to swim over there, and you only let the kids come over there and play because you don't want to get showed up. Now, second of all, you know, the men out there racing on these dirt tracks deserve a little bit more respect, like they used to when, you know, motorsports all kind of worked together. When you had this thing called IROC, when the goal of a race car driver in America wasn't to be some freaking stock car champion. Didn't used to be that big old of a deal, you know. And it seemed like the sport was a little bit more healthier then as well. But anyways, I think a lot of these race car drivers are getting slapped in the face. There is no high school, there is no college for everyone to be equally judged on. You got to be some little lucky punk, 5 years old, racing, you know, having $1 million put into you by the age of 18, and then you get to be dubbed one of the greatest race car drivers in America. 43 people that you see on your TV screen are not 43 of the greatest race car drivers in America. They're just 43 of the luckiest sumbitches that you may know that know how to get around the track pretty good. Now, we got a couple people up in there from the dirt racing world and a couple people in there who have made it the right way, but there's not a lot of them. And some of the people up there from the dirt racing world, you know, they were one of those 18-year-old kids who had, you know, the opportunities that a lot of the other people didn't. Say some other person wants to be a race car driver. Once again, no high school or college. They got to get to 18, go and get a job and start working to save up money to race on these little short tracks. And then by the time they're 25 and they have the money and equipment to do it, you deem them as less. You deem them as not good enough. But I can tell you right now, you can't take Kyle Busch and put him in some of these cars out here, or any of your little preppy rich kids in one of these dirt cars and whoop up on Donnie Schatz. Heck, you can't beat Justin Whitehead in a factory stop. And let me show you something. You know, sedans and trucks, you know, those are for the asphalt preppy rich kids over there. But they're also for the cars. You know, we got this thing right here. Let me show you. This is what we call a race car. Now, it doesn't literally look like a sedan or a truck. That's because it's a machine. You know, men build stuff like this. They work on it with their hands. You got to understand how this works. You know, men work on the race cars. Boys just have someone else do it for them. Or they pay somebody. Let me show you something else, too. This is what we call a truck. Now, you know what men do with trucks, Sonny? Men go to work in trucks. We don't race trucks. You know, no disrespect to Mr. Stewart, which I know he's one of the guys out there who understands what I'm saying. There's some other people who know what I'm talking about. But honestly, when I saw one of your concrete queens hit a dirt track, it was one of those what the fuck moments. Who the hell? It was like a girl walking into the men's restroom. On the dirt track is where the men get it on, all right? So me personally, I would rather you start, if you want to make dirt track racing great like it once was. And if we need to start getting the respect that we deserve in dirt track racing. These kids out here and these men out here who are really racing don't need to die for you to see them on your TV screen. That's kind of sick and disgusting to me, especially when they're unfairly judged as not good enough to make it to your level of motorsports. When that's not the case at all. Everyone within racing knows that it's all about money, but the people outside of racing don't know that. Okay? When you go down the street and you see some 25-year-old playing football, he's some guy who couldn't make it, so they relate that stuff to our sport. Because they view you now in stock car land as the pros, when you're not. You're just a division like you used to be. Remember that thing called IROC? When everybody had their greatest of the greats? You couldn't just walk in a sprint car and whoop on Swindell or Kinzer. You couldn't just walk in an Indy car and whoop up on any of those boys because you can't. And everyone knew that before Mr. Gordon came along, and apparently being a stock car champion is all that matters now. So anyways, men drive trucks to go to work. Preppy little rich kids race trucks. They're concrete queens out there. Keep those things on the asphalt track. Start respecting these race machines and the men behind the wheel of them. That's my opinion. That's my opinion. And I'm trying to get me, like I said, some horses together, because I'm going to start calling out what's going on. Because the racing world is pretty sick and disgusting as far as respect goes. And I think there's a lot of hard-working men out there, the Dale Earnhardt seniors, that don't get a shot no more. You know, that was the last guy that actually worked for what he got. You know, he had to work for it. You know, that used to be your show. You never had a great race, Mr. Stock Car. You had a Silver Fox or a fight in the infield. And you think Gordon put you on the map? No, that was Earnhardt versus Gordon. The working men versus the preppy rich kid. Okay? And you keep trying to find Gordon thinking that's what blew you up. Now there's room for those guys. But right now there ain't no room for these men out here putting on a real show. On the dirt tracks, we put on a show on the track, buddy. We don't need a fight. Because our show is the race. Not some dramatics. And once maybe some people start figuring that out and we get some respect, maybe we need to put Kyle Busch in a sprint car and see what his ass can do. Because I know some boys that'll whoop him real quick. Hell, I know some girls that'll whoop him real quick in a sprint car. Or a late model. Let's put him in a late model. He's already got a little practice in that. Let's put him up there against Bloomquist. Don't let the little girls go out there and fumble around in our cars like the Prelude did. Don't do that. Put him up against a man behind the wheel of a car. And let's see what he does. But anyways, that's my thoughts. Trucks. Men go to work in them. Your little concrete queens were slower than some factory stocks, buddy. If I want to see something on a dirt track, and I want to gain some respect for the dirt track scene, I start helping them understand how that's a race machine. And the men behind those cars are some bad motherfuckers.
I took that video, went home, created Dirt Track State of Mind, October 22nd, 2017, and posted it. Immediately, it got about 100 shares or so, and around 40,000 views. I thought to myself, this is what I can do, this is it. I can take my opinion and say it out loud without anyone telling me that I can't, and heck, maybe build the page up to a point it can make a few bucks. Kind of just like playing the guitar or a race car, but performing my truth instead. And I did. Another video came out, a couple 10,000 views, and another one with a hint to the clues I had found, and that one reached 175,000 views. It blew up, which is the same video Kyle Larson came in and defended the stock car racers. He didn't like my King of the Wheel idea, which was a match race I created between NASCAR racers and weekly racers in dirt cars. I even matched him in a factory stock against a guy named Justin Whitehead. And if you don't know who that is, Larson would have had trouble staying within 2 seconds of him. But I kept making the videos. Then I shifted to doing reality TV style shows, displaying all the behind the scenes action of what these racers were doing. I got sponsorships and advertisers to get involved. By this time, I'd also went to a by-project basis at the roofing company and rented out a house in Tyler, Texas. I then went to California again, covered Aiden Lang as he got his first career CLS win. Went to Florida next and stirred some things up with a few cats. Also went up to PA, covered a few micro sprint races, and even captured a midget ride the fence. Then I drove to Indiana, watched a cowboy ride again. But I would have to go back to Texas to cover the monthly rent. As the house in Tyler wasn't free, I continued throughout the year doing the shows and making talking style videos from various locations, ending the year at the Gateway Dirt Nationals in St. Louis. At this point, I felt like the house in Tyler was holding me back, and I made the decision in 2019 and leave that house and drive to Tulsa, driving with nothing but devotion to a dirt track state of mind. I would go on to Tulsa to mix it up a bit, talking about some burgers and fries, and the Larsonites didn't like that too much. I also spoke as to how sad it must be that every year after the Chili Bowl, that because our dirt racing sport isn't as glamorous or profitable like it once was, that the modern day Swindell and Kensers like Larson and Bell have to go to NASCAR to make a good living racing. In almost a sugar daddy-esque way. They don't love NASCAR, but he has the money. And then dirt racing is like the construction worker who they really love. But he doesn't have the money that their sugar daddy has. But they come to the construction worker after they make their money. So sick and disgusting. They choose the money over love, ultimately. They don't devote to the sport of dirt and sacrifice the dollars or try to stay in dirt and build it up. They just continue the trend and sell midget renter rides as the stepping stone or path to be just like them that was put in place by the system with Jeff Gordon. Anyway, after the Chili Bowl, I then went to Florida and did some talk shows. Promoted Carson Elledge to a household name, it seems, by showing the dirt world exactly how this royalty system works in the racing world, with possibly the greatest example in modern racing history. And after that, filmed a few reality shows at North Florida and Volusia, then was heading to Bike Week in Daytona. Was about 30 minutes away from the Airbnb when I had enough of the verbal threats, and a new shift for my year was about to be encountered. Well, it's getting a little late, and I was just over here to Daytona Beach, Florida for some Bike Week. But you know what?
I've always liked four wheels. And there was some guy on the SprintCarFan.com message board on Facebook talking about he's going to be at Stockton this Saturday if I want to have a few damn words with him. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? You better hide your kids and hide your wife, because I'm climbing through a fucking window, and that window's a 40-hour fucking drive to Stockton. And I'm going to bring me a fucking table and a camera, and if any of you punk-ass bitches want to sit down and have a chat, how about you show the fuck up? I'll be there, motherfucker.
I'd gotten tired of all these people saying they were going to do this or that to me, and this Ron wanted to whoop my ass at Stockton, he said in the comment section. So I proposed to come and have a discussion with him. As much as people to this day lie and say I threatened to kick his ass, they're what I like to call ignorantly biased. So I drove 41 hours, slept in the ice cold, shaved, and almost died when my windshield froze in the winding mountains of northwest California, and arrived at Silver Dollar. Watched a night of racing, then showed up at Stockton the next day. Ron never showed up, but I did. Dressed in my, at the time, signature suit. People wanted to meet me, say hi. We talked and watched racing for the night. People were astonished that I had even made the trip. But I always try to do what I say I'm going to do. The next week, some Jim Chionius from PA wanted to say hi, but I didn't have enough gas money. I proposed on camera that I would try and maybe use Uber Eats and deliver food to get my way there, and for the first time, even though I'd suffered with no food and went hungry, for the first time, I also offered people to donate to the cause. People poured in to get me to the track. And I arrived from Fresno, where I had stayed Monday, and left on a Tuesday to the Lincoln Speedway that Friday night. And from there, I wanted to go drive go-karts at the Swindell gig in Indianapolis, only to get there and be hauled out by police because an Elledge was in the building and didn't like me. I then didn't have nowhere to stay in PA, drove down to Virginia, which was where my closest supporter with a bed was. On the drive, some guys in Arizona said they wanted to say hi and that I drove by them twice without even giving them a go. So I went from Virginia to Arizona and started the first episode of Let's Talk About It. Then old Larson started running his mouth and I went to Charlotte, only to pass by twice in this trailer with no one around. After watching Gio put it on Larson's ass, the huge dust storm that was Charlotte was enough for me, and I went up to Port Royal the next night. Stayed in PA a bit, talked about Larson taking Bell out, went to Iowa, went to Missouri, went to Ohio, Indiana, and back to PA. And then it happened. Long Live the Chaz is something that I made up one day for the fans. A few had been saying it more and more, as there was so much hate from people towards me, but a good section of people who liked the Chaz. And this was their way to stick it to the system in place. And when Justin Sanders threw that on his race car, I knew I had to come to the West Coast because someone had the balls to put it out there. My name on their car, the symbolic middle finger to the power structure in racing. That's what Long Live the Chaz is. And if you question the sincerity, then you can turn this shit off right now. Don't need you, and you damn sure don't need me. So after that happened, I made the Oregon Trail, which started with a stop off in Wisconsin to the Mississippi Thunder Speedway, then through the Yellowstone National Forest where I ran into a flat tire, a broken wheel lock, and a bear. I continued on and made it to Cottage Grove, where Justin Sanders and Long Live the Chaz went to Victory Lane that night. The week had some bumps and even an encounter with a power structure that didn't want me in town, as well as a few Larson nights who had me surrounded in the parking lot after the race at Sunset Speedway. I left, but came back and finished the week in Oregon. I then went to the King's Roll, watched 175,000 change hands, then met some Aussies in Indiana. Went to the Knoxville Nationals, predicted the winner weeks in advance. Flew back to California, saw the Gold Cup, talked to the predictier, and also met a Nick. Then I flew back out to Iowa to get my car. Saw the Hockett-McMillan Memorial. Then I went to drive to complete the lower 48 states in 2019 by going to Maine. And well, that damned old Nick was gonna run a four-banger. So I had to drive from coast to coast for that sumbitch, and watched him get around the track. and one quick nick picked up a championship by outrunning a helicopter. Then I went to the AZ State Fair to try and kick a Mormon's ass. Back to California after that to jump in the asphalt car and rattle some cages in the K&N garage. And well, since then, I've been in California. And people keep asking me, what are you doing in Northern California? Well, what was it all for? What is the point? People keep asking me. And sometimes I keep asking myself. I shared a photo of my weight loss the other day, and that got a big reaction, and well, that was a big reason I decided to make this video. I needed to tell people where I've come from, and maybe I needed to write it all out myself, and find out why I have done everything I've done. But I will admit, I didn't make this coming decision on my own. I was sitting about a week ago, trying to figure out what was the point. Well, the weight loss seemed to have the biggest reaction, because it is a symbolism of a transformation. So I have to ask myself, what was that transformation for? What was the point of that? Was it so I could run around meeting people? Well, no. Was it so I could sit here and tell my truth to the racing world? No. Was it to become some music superstar? No. Was it so I could be a racetrack announcer or promoter? No. And while I was sitting here asking this question, what was the point? In that exact moment, confusion at its highest, almost to the point of asking it out loud. What to do with all this? What was the point? A coincidental message came across my screen.
I won't just survive. Oh, you will see me thrive. Can write my story. I'm beyond the archetype. I won't